the Supreme Leader reluctantly gives his approval for a surprise attack on U.S. forces. This is meant to bloody America's nose and hopefully deter them from seeking further escalation.
If you would like to hang out, make sure you join one of my live streams. The links for those are down below, either for my YouTube or my Twitch. Also, my Patreon has lots more content on there that you haven't seen if you haven't joined.
Oh, please. Okay, you tell me where you can get aborted fetuses for 70 cents on the dollar. You tell me, Chuck. Yeah, I didn't think so. You know, I'm just like the fetuses, Chuck. I wasn't born yesterday either. Uh-huh.
Hey guys.
See ya.
Today I'm going to be watching a video. This is how World War III starts. USA versus Iran. I think we're supposed to react to this a few days ago.
Iranian missiles rain down on the U.S. base. With terrifying precision, a new generation of maneuverable warheads slips past American Patriot interceptors. In just 20 minutes, the devastation is staggering. Over $500 million worth of F-35s and advanced U.S. combat jets are reduced to smoking wreckage. For 2 months, the U.S. has been strengthening its forces in the Middle East. At Diego Garcia, deep in the Indian Ocean, sit 6 B-2 Spirit bombers, America's most cutting-edge operational aircraft, and the only one slated to carry the GBU-57 bomb. These aircraft, and the 2 GBU-57s that each one carries, are a critical threat to Iran because of their ability to evade air defenses and destroy deeply buried underground military structures.
Did not know the US had that. Might be a little late for this video. Yep.
But the U.S. also has sent dozens of F-35s and other combat aircraft, including F-15s, F-16s, and A-10s to the region. One of the first acts of the new American administration was to put maximum pressure on Iran. The president is seeking a new deal with Iran to ensure that it doesn't become a nuclear power. The only problem is, Iran refuses to negotiate with the White House, and from their point of view, why should they? America has proven that its word is worthless. It previously signed a deal with Iran to loosen sanctions in exchange for giving up its nuclear ambitions. Then, a few years later, despite being in full compliance, the deal was torn up. In the following years, new deals were proposed, and with the new administration in the White House, progress has stalled completely.
Again, I don't know exactly why it would have been torn up. I mean, we put new people in the White House and they might say, hey, we didn't agree with that president in the first place, so we're just going to change the plan. But it is unfortunate because then people might be less likely to make deals going forward, thinking, oh, well, sure, I'm making a deal with you and I might even trust you, but you're not even going to be in office in 6 years. So how are you going to guarantee this deal will be here forever? You won't even be able to control what happens after 4.
America's subsequent attacks on allies and threats to invade their territory has only made the United States an increasingly unreliable negotiator. So, Iran has demanded third-party talks over its nuclear program. The reason for this is that if it can get a third party, like Qatar or the UAE, to mediate talks, well then they'll become politically infested. Another betrayal by America will have political ramifications for the third nation as well. It's a strategic move to ensure the U.S. keeps its promises, especially now that its reputation on the global stage has taken a hit.
Just trying to make sure that I'm pausing enough because, well, yeah, just sorry if it's annoying. If you want to go watch the original video because you don't like the pausing, then I definitely encourage you to go do that. Make sure you check out the channel. It'll be linked down below.
In response, all of America's Middle Eastern allies and partners, save for Israel, have shut down their airspace to U.S. combat aircraft, limiting the routes by which U.S. warplanes could approach Iran. This dramatically increases the threat to American aviators, even those flying B-2 stealth bombers. It makes their approaches very predictable, allowing Iran to concentrate their air defenses in specific areas. So, how would any potential conflict play out?
I appreciate how it was broken down and explained that if they just go to a third party and get support from anybody else, it does make America's job or whatever they're trying to do harder, because then it's even more people who are involved and would be disappointed if they don't keep their word. I mean, if you don't keep your word with one nation that you might see as, okay, well, it's justifiable because they're a threat, or it's justifiable because they didn't keep their word, or they did something that they didn't want to negotiate with, but now it's another nation that had their back, it kind of makes us look worse if we attack or do something. But again, I'll I'll just save the majority of the commentary, I guess, later.
Internal politics within Tehran are at a boiling point. The regime is increasingly unpopular and slowly losing grip on the population. The people of Iran are starting to embrace increasingly liberal values over the strict conservative religious order imposed on them. The American military buildup comes hot on the heels of Iran's embarrassing failure to strike at Israel in one of the largest missile attacks in history. The October 2024 attack saw over 200 missiles launched at Israel in 2 waves, but the only direct casualty was a Palestinian civilian who was crushed by the debris from an Iranian missile.
Oh, that's embarrassing. Feel so bad for the casualty, and it's nothing to laugh about. Even one casualty is a casualty. Appreciated in this video is kind of mentioning how the people feel about the government. It's not just Iran versus whoever. It's also pointing out that it's the government or the regime in Iran, and then the people are kind of separated from that. I mean, they probably don't necessarily want or wish war or bombs or missiles on just civilians, but at the same time, if they could hear, oh wait, these are specifically targeted strikes, like we're only going to try to take out the government and try to not hurt civilians. It's interesting to see a lot of Iranians might even be for that. Just seems important to differentiate, because when you're rooting for a country that you think is being taken advantage of, but the people are actually the ones feeling taken advantage of, you should know their perspective.
This was after a previous failure in April 2024, when it launched the world's largest drone attack and achieved similar results. The cumulative effect has been humiliating for Iran's hardline leadership. Now the American military buildup, meant to intimidate Iran, is seen as the last straw. Pressure mounts from senior figures within the Tehran regime to act or face a political crisis. The supreme leader reluctantly gives his approval for a surprise attack on U.S. forces. This is meant to bloody America's nose and hopefully deter them from seeking further escalation.
Yeah, not one, but 2 examples of not being able to do what you're saying that you're going to do. Not the best way at wanting people to take you seriously.
2:45 a.m., May 12, 2025. The scheduled attack order is broadcast to mobile launchers in the Fars province, along with above-ground and underground missile bases in Khuzestan. The target is Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, America's largest Middle Eastern facility. It is the key hub for U.S. Central Command, whose area of operations extends across all of Iran. The goal is to destroy the base's runways and adjoining runway infrastructure directly supporting air operations. But the high-priority target is the U.S. CENTCOM command post, buried deep under the base. The strike package consists of 20 Zulfikar ballistic missiles, 20 Desfo ballistic missiles, 10 Sajil ballistic missiles, 15 Fateh Mobin missiles, and 20 Shahed 136 loitering munitions.
Maybe I'm confused. I don't want to swing too far to not taking them seriously and be biased just because of recent events, but I'm taking just based off of the video is, oh, well, in October and in August, and it's like, well, that's enough. Yeah, it just kind of sounds like we're way more prepared, and the U.S.'s equipment strikes where they tell it to. Also seems like they're all around, so could respond a lot quicker than maybe would be expected. I don't know. I think that this part I can't really comment on because I don't think that I simply just don't think that I know what I'm talking about.
Defending Al Udeid is a THAAD battery and 3 Patriot batteries, augmented recently with reinforcements from the continental United States. The base also sports several CRAM systems for last-ditch defense around key installations. Out at sea, 2 American Aegis-equipped ships patrol the waters. Mobile launchers in the Fars province are the first to fire, quickly followed by launches from 2 of Iran's underground missile bases in Khuzestan. The fiery plumes of the missile's rocket engines are immediately spotted by loitering American infrared satellites. Dozens of signatures are registered in the first 20 seconds. An alert is immediately sent to the U.S. National Military Command Center in Washington. Within seconds of the first wave of missiles firing, 3 small civilian ships just off the shore of Qatar began firing missiles of their own. These are Iran's Fateh Mobin, 29.5 feet long infrared homing missiles that can be used to attack land targets or in the anti-ship role. They're also small enough to be loaded into cargo containers and disguised as regular cargo, giving them a huge element of surprise.
This is the part of the video where I guess I get a little confused at, whenever you list everything like that, kind of just sounds as if they have a lot, but can't be more than what the U.S. could be prepared with. and it's kind of already not taking them as seriously now. You should always take things seriously because everything should be a threat until you like no, it isn't otherwise. But they've kind of proven twice. I mean, we're not talking about like years ago, last year, like a few months ago, kind of proved that a lot of their stuff doesn't even seem accurate.
The Fateh Mobin are targeting the American air defense radars and satellite dishes, hoping to blind the U.S. defense against the rest of the incoming missiles. The coast is a swarm of drones. The drones accelerate to 115 miles per hour, well behind the subsonic Fateh Mobin missiles. Both, however, take the same approach to their targets. After an initial arc up into the air, they dive for the wave tops and then ride right along the sea, staying under American radar. The only warning the Americans get is a brief alert as Patriot air defense radar spots the missiles and drones on their initial launch. The sky lights up with laser-like fire from their tracers, and 3 more explosions light up the dark as the C-rams strike true. The Sajil missiles arrive next, moving at hypersonic speeds as they drop down on the base from an extremely high apogee. Patriot interceptors fire off, but the missiles are moving fast. 8 out of the 10 missiles are destroyed. The other 2 strike a fuel tank in one of the hardened shelters, destroying the F-22 inside. The depot.
I feel like we're not accounting for the missing, like how some of them just wouldn't make it. We shoot down some, the fact that some of them even make it that far because we didn't notice that they were coming, or our sensors were too late because they were flying right there in apparently a zone that we wouldn't be able to tell. Again, I trust that this person knows a lot more what they're talking about than I do, but that was an interesting part of the video, hearing, oh, just out of the radar, just out of the sensors of where we would be able to detect it. Really? Oh.
Out at sea, thanks to networked defenses, the Navy's 2 Aegis-equipped vessels begin lending their own support to the base's defense. The Shahed drones are targeted and destroyed. Only 2 of them manage to slip through. Meanwhile, the rest of Iran's missiles are arriving in numbers, greeted high in the atmosphere by American interceptors. A fireworks show results as missiles and interceptors collide at hypersonic speeds. The Shahed drones that survive to arrive at the base find the C-RAM systems to be out of ammunition and dip low to strike at exposed aircraft. The entire attack is over in less than half an hour.
I would not say that they are not capable, because again, I can't say enough in this video, so people don't come after me. I know that I don't know what I'm talking about. It's just a reaction. This isn't coming from somebody who's served in the military or has any education on any information. I don't do research daily. I've looked into, no I haven't. So I know I have no idea.
Most of Iran's weapons have been intercepted, and yet the U.S. has already lost nearly $500 million in aircraft alone. Damage to the base will mount to several $billion. It'll take days for basic operations to begin again, and weeks for normal operations to resume. 1 American pilot is killed along with several ground crew, and dozens of Americans suffer traumatic brain injuries from the shock of the explosions. The debris kills 1 civilian outside of the base and wounds several others, causing outrage from Qatar. The question is, what happens next?
A lot of things are still believable though, especially coming from someone who's ignorant. It's not really hard to tell me, wait, that's missiles that exist? I didn't know. You could tell me anything and make up missiles and I would just be like, wow, I didn't know that they had that technology. Like, I have no idea. And you could say 200, but it's hard to understand if that's a lot compared to how many their counterparts would have to fire back. Like, you could say 200, you could say 8, and all of it kind of almost sounds the same to me because I don't know what's normal and I don't know in comparison what somebody would be able to immediately respond with. So again, coming from someone ignorant, it does seem a little, wait, really? Would it? Yeah, they could probably cause damage, but I already would immediately think not that much damage. And it seems like the US would be able to respond a little bit quicker. But you never know. It could happen on a day where they just can't, or something goes wrong where that one thing was taken out that makes responding quicker or being aware of the situation take a little bit longer. So I wouldn't just assume, oh, they would, but I would say more than 50% of the time, I would bet they can't respond a little bit quicker or less damage would be done.
Question is, what happens next? While the previous scenario may have been fictional, it is very much a real possibility, and Iran is more than capable of pulling off such an attack. The use of a large missile force and drones is one of those ways, with some small enough to be camouflaged as civilian containers, just for such a surprise attack. Currently, America's options for attacking Iran are limited. Despite all its power, the US very much needs the support of allies and partners, and at the moment, it is not getting it. Nations like Jordan and Saudi Arabia may not be friends of Tehran, but they also don't want to see a regional war in their own backyard. The collateral damage and resulting refugee crisis is enough to deter those nations from greenlighting a U.S. attack on Iran. This is why their airspace remains closed to any American warplane on its way to Iran.
One of the things that immediately deters this fictional scenario is the assumption that these places wouldn't give the U.S. permission to fly over. They don't want war, or they want to defend them because they decided to be a cooperating third party, whatever the right word is. Yeah, this all goes out the window as soon as the U.S. apparently does get permission or does convince them, hey, you want to let us handle this first? Because if we don't, this will happen. And then you'll also have casualties. I mean, that seems like the immediate conversation that would be held is, hey, the U.S. needs to put a stop to this pretty quickly. And if what's stopping us is these extra parties saying you can't fly over, and well, we're not okay with that. Well, now we're having a conversation about how you're part of the problem. So that conversation is going to probably go a certain way.
The nation suffers from a mix of old and new technology, but it still presents a significant threat to U.S. planes carrying out an attack, especially when their avenues of approach to their target are limited and thus well known. A land war is out of the question, as the U.S. has no desire to get involved in another land war in the Middle East so soon. Iran's 610,000 active-duty troops also poses a significant challenge, mostly because they can do something that Iraq's military couldn't do when it faced a U.S. threat twice in its history.
Clearly also wasn't aware of how many active troops. That one might not be as important information because, like I said, with numbers, it's really hard to have a grasp on that anyways, so I know it's important, but if you have a lack of understanding, I guess it doesn't affect the conversation as much.
Iran was a keen observer of the First Gulf War and the second invasion of Iraq, learning valuable lessons about how to defend against the American military. Chief amongst those lessons is that under no circumstances can you allow the U.S. to stage its forces prior to an invasion. Once the U.S. troops arrive in theater in large numbers, it's impossible to remove them. It doesn't matter how much stronger the U.S. military is. Superiority means nothing if you can't even get your troops into the fight. America's options are thus limited in a war with Iran to the use of air and missile strikes. These are unlikely to achieve the U.S.'s goal of either a regime change or a course correction on both nuclear and missile programs.
It is a good point to say, technically it doesn't really matter how powerful someone is. If they can't get that power to a certain position, then they can't utilize that power. So it is a fair argument to say, if somebody's invested 90 or 80% of their actual money into their military, just to make sure that you can't cross this bridge or the air to get to where you need to get, once you're on the ground, once you would be a threat, then you can never show force, or really, you can't really do anything. Completely fair argument.
The Iranian regime faces one key weakness it didn't before. The Iranian people are growing increasingly tired of the regime, and they could become susceptible to U.S. psychological warfare and influence operations. An increasingly angry citizenry would then likely rise up and demand a change of regime. Iran is already facing electricity shortages that are deeply unpopular with the population. It's not just electricity, it's also natural gas for heating and cooking, along with a shortage of gasoline. On average, Iran has a 20% deficit of electricity, a 25% natural gas deficit, and gasoline availability can be spotty at best.
That one's unfortunate. That's kind of sad for the people. But yeah, a smart tactic is to turn your own people against you in a time of war, because then it's just another thing that you have to deal with your own people demanding change while you're trying to handle something. So that's yeah, smart, just kind of sad.
The energy crisis the nation finds itself in is one of its own making, along with the cost of financial sanctions by the international community. In order to avoid a full-blown public rebellion, Iran invests as much as 25% of its GDP each year on subsidies for energy, making it dirt cheap for the public. But that is only when it's actually available. These subsidies also sap the Iranian checkbook to the point that it's unable to keep up payments on the import of energy from the few places willing to trade with Iran. What few attempts there are at expansion of energy infrastructure are often met with huge inefficiencies and corruption. A lot of money is siphoned off by corrupt politicians or simply lost in inefficiency. The fact that Iranian gas is so cheap also means that it is creating a black market of its own making. It can be very profitable for enterprising Iranians to simply smuggle a significant amount of gasoline out of the country to sell to neighbors, decreasing available supply inside Iran itself.
Interesting to hear how it works. It's actually so cheap there that it makes people end up trying to sell it to neighboring places to make money off of it because they get it so cheap. So ironically, it's still hurting your own system because people are just selling it elsewhere. I have such a problem that it makes it into a video where, hey, they've actually tried to help their energy infrastructure before, but time and time again, people are just so corrupt that they end up taking the majority of the money and running away with it.
Then there's Iran's poor foreign policy decisions. For almost a decade, Iran provided Syria with up to 100,000 barrels of oil a day completely for free, even as its own citizens were experiencing gasoline shortages. The charity was at the time supporting Iranian interests inside Syria, but with the collapse of the national government there and the ousting of Iranian proxies, the energy investment is now a decade-long foible with no payoff.
Wait, what? Oh my god, they did that? 100,000 barrels a day, while their own people day to day had a hard time with gas? It was a huge investment, like a huge, it'll pay off, trust me.
The energy crisis spirals into other areas of the Iranian economy, increasing prices everywhere from construction to food and limiting economic activity. Iran is basically a pressure cooker that's about ready to explode. A single successful American military campaign against the regime that avoids heavy civilian casualties could be all that is needed for a major regime change in the country. An America First policy that ignores allies has turned what should be an easy tactical victory into a potential minefield of consequences for the US and the region at large. What do you think would be the biggest risk if the US and Iran actually went to war? Would it stay regional or spiral into something much bigger? Drop your thoughts in the comments.
Yeah, it's still an interesting video. I apologize for my nervous commentary. I think that it's a bit jumbled and unorganized. I will try to work on it. If you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe. Go check out my other links for my live streams. And I'll see you all next time.
Bye, bye, baby blue.